This episode is brought to you by Surfshark. Hi, welcome to another episode of ColdFusion, where I cover anything in science, technology, business or history. Carlos Ghosn was a lot of things: a powerful, ambitious, intelligent businessman, bilingual, multicultural, and charismatic. Many aspired to be like him, while others saw him as nothing more than a megalomaniac. It seemed like he was always destined to be remembered, and that may hold true, but perhaps not for the reasons he would have liked. In this episode, we'll see how one of the greatest businessmen rose his way up to the top and ended up a wanted fugitive by escaping Japanese authorities by being smuggled in a box. Let's take a look.
You are watching ColdFusion TV.
A gifted mathematician and businessman, Carlos began making good impressions straight out of university. In 1978, he joined the company Michelin. Within 3 years of working at various plants across Europe, he was made a manager. A few years later, he was once again promoted to head of research and development for the company's industrial tire division. But Carlos was far from done. After just 1 year in that position, at the age of 30, he was appointed to Chief Operating Officer of South American Operations. Carlos Ghosn had a knack for cross-cultural management. This could be credited to his multicultural upbringing. He was born in Brazil, moved to Lebanon when he was 6, and educated in France. He was a self-proclaimed citizen of the world. He used this to his advantage when he began overseeing operations in multiple South American countries. While he was with Michelin, he became known as a turnaround specialist, and once he had finished turning unprofitable operations into thriving ones in South America, he made the move to South Carolina with his family to take up the position of COO of Michelin North America. 1 year later, he was promoted to CEO. After 18 years with Michelin, Carlos was seeking a new challenge. He had already built a solid name for himself and a reputation that landed him a position with the car manufacturer Renault. He was hired as the Executive Vice President in charge of purchasing, advanced research, engineering and development, powertrain operations, and manufacturing, as well as overseeing Renault's South American division. Once again, Carlos proved himself to be an expert at reorganizing operations and building profitability. He had an incredible eye for recognizing how and when a company was in need of radical restructuring, and his changes paid off for Renault. His success with Renault put him in a desirable position when, in 1999, the company bought a 36.8% stake in Nissan, which was struggling to maintain profitability. This was the beginning of the Renault-Nissan alliance. Whilst still holding on to his role at Renault, Carlos Ghosn also took the position of COO of Nissan. A year later, he was president, and a year after that, he was named CEO. Carlos liked a challenge. In fact, he'd built a career out of it. That's why it made sense that he was so keen to oversee Nissan, which at the time was the ultimate test. Returning Nissan to a profitable brand was widely considered an impossible task. This made it irresistible to Carlos. At the time, Nissan was $20 billion in debt, and only 3 out of its 46 car models were profitable. And this is why it seemed ludicrous when Carlos announced the Nissan Revival Plan. Under the guidelines of this plan, he would turn Nissan around in just 3 years. It called for a return to profitability within 1 year, a 4.5% increase in profit margin in 2 years, and a 50% reduction in debt in 3 years. Carlos was confident. So confident, he even said that if he was not able to reach these targets, he and his board would resign. It was a tall order, and one that would require ruthless restructuring. Carlos cut 21,000 jobs, shut 5 manufacturing plants, and sold Nissan's aerospace unit, which to be honest I didn't even know they had. He embarked on a dramatic shuffling of corporate positions and structures, defying Japanese business etiquette at every step. By the time Carlos was done, Nissan was almost unrecognizable. But in the ruthless, brutal madness that was Nissan's revival plan, there were well-defined goals, and Carlos had achieved each of those goals with 9 months to spare. It was a remarkable achievement. For a foreign businessman to be accepted by the public while taking over a Japanese company with as much history as Nissan took a lot of convincing. But these initial years of success had done just that, and Carlos was shot into the spotlight, becoming a fully fledged business celebrity. he began regularly appearing in newspapers, magazines, and on television. His image was used in comics, lunchbooks, and postage stamps. His previous success quickly became minor achievements in comparison to what would be his achievements in the early 2000s. This became most apparent in 2005 when he assumed the role of CEO at Renault, making him the first person in history to be the CEO of 2 Fortune 500 companies at the same time. Carlos was unstoppable, and he was becoming a superstar. Over the next decade, he became a household name around the globe. But in that time, cracks began to show, especially in his working relationships. By the mid-2010s, Carlos was no longer in the business of turning around failing companies. He was in charge of growing 2 brands. Renault was steadily performing well, but Nissan had transformed into a massive powerhouse of the industry. Juggling the 2 brands across nations and cultures didn't fit well with his newfound stardom and jet-setting lifestyle, and his peers began to notice his absence. The man who once was extremely hands-on and present was now distant and preoccupied. But Carlos didn't see it this way. That's why in October of 2016, Nissan purchased a 34% stake in Mitsubishi Motors, and Carlos Ghosn was appointed chairman. At the time, Mitsubishi was another brand that needed a facelift. The company's revenue had been falling, and they were deep within an emissions scandal. It was another challenge for Carlos to sink his teeth into. But he had some secrets, and they were about to catch up with him. In November of 2018, as he landed in a Tokyo airport, police boarded his private plane and Carlos was arrested over allegations of false accounting. This was the beginning of a new and unpleasant chapter in his life. The news was sudden and shocking. There were no rumors or indicators that something like this was coming, which led many to speculate that this must have come from within Nissan. You see, the speculators claimed that Nissan had outgrown the need for such a man as Carlos and had worked with authorities to remove him from the company without the need for a payout. The rumor was further fueled when it was discovered that the reason that Carlos was flying to Japan was for an unusually rushed meeting organized by his colleagues on short notice. Commentators believed that the entire situation was a trap to catch a man whose ego had outgrown the company that he ran. Carlos believes that this was a joint mission by Nissan and the Japanese government, who feared that France's Renault was attempting to take complete control over Japan's precious Nissan. Supporters of Carlos also note that the Japanese legal system is known to be corrupt. The system only chases high conviction rates in the range of over 90%, objectively unfair. But regardless of intentions, the evidence of his crimes were actually real. Carlos was stood down from his positions within the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance. Before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor. Now, you may not be in trouble with the Japanese government, like Carlos, but you still may want to be protected and keep your online information private, whether that's from big tech companies or other parties. More privacy is always good. One of the best ways to protect yourself is by Surfshark VPN. With Surfshark, you can protect yourself from spying, malware and phishing, and also get access to content that's been region blocked. Surfshark is offering you guys an 83% discount if you use the code ColdFusion, plus 3 extra months free. To get started, click the link in the description below. Thanks. Now back to the episode. Carlos was obsessed with growth, and that did include his salary. He was resentful of the fact that other CEOs of car manufacturers in countries like the United States were on significantly higher wages than he was able to negotiate, and it could be said that he was doing a much better job than any of them. If he couldn't be officially paid what he believed he deserved, he would seek out other means of compensation. As it turned out, Carlos was using Nissan money to pay for a long list of personal expenses and purchases. He used Nissan funds to pay for various homes across Europe and South America, a luxurious private yacht, and would use the Nissan private jet for personal trips, like vacationing with his family. He funneled millions of dollars from Nissan accounts into companies related to his family. He also used Nissan funds for elaborate, extravagant parties. It was also alleged that Carlos, with the help of his co-conspirator and aide, Greg Kelly, set up a complicated structure of payment plans that allowed $80 million to go unreported. Following the allegations in Japan, came similar findings in France, when Renault published an internal audit showing 11 million euros worth of questionable expenses that could be traced back to Carlos. Then, United States prosecutors also came after him with allegations that he failed to report $140 million that was paid to him by Nissan. In all of this, he never denied or admitted to the accusations, but instead settled. He was fined $1 million, while Nissan as a company was fined $15 million. He was also given a 10-year ban from serving as an officer or director of any public company. It also turned out that there were controversies in the way that he ran his businesses. Internal and external investigations found that through fear and intimidation, Carlos was able to run his companies like a dictator. He believed that his reputation and track record would allow him to get away with whatever he wanted. In total, Carlos spent 108 days in Japanese prison before being released on bail under strict conditions. He was ordered to stay in a heavily monitored property under 24-hour surveillance. He was without internet access. If he was to leave, it would be under the supervision of 2 officers. The Japanese authorities had no intention of letting him out of their sight. And this is why it came as such a shock when on the 30th of December of 2019, Carlos Ghosn arrived in Lebanon. Since leaving Japan, Carlos has spoken openly to the media about how he pulled off his extraordinary feat. He claims that he had no choice but to escape, stating he could, quote, no longer be held hostage by a rigged Japanese justice system where guilt is presumed, discrimination is rampant, and basic human rights are denied. Here's how he did it. Carlos had noticed that officers would not follow him into a hotel meeting, and this is how he would begin his escape. He claims to have disguised himself in unusual clothes while wearing a medical face mask, which is common in Japan. He used the disguise to first sneak out of the hotel. He then caught a bullet train to a second hotel where his co-conspirators had arranged a large, empty audio equipment case for Carlos to sit in. He was then carried out of the hotel, driven out of the city to a remote airport, and placed on a private jet. He sat patiently, waiting for the plane to take off, and when he re-emerged from his box, he was a free man. To avoid raising suspicions, he flew from Japan to Turkey, then boarded a plane headed to Istanbul. He walked out of the airport in Istanbul, confident he was free. Lebanon doesn't have an extradition treaty with Japan, which meant that as long as Carlos stayed there wasn't much that the Japanese government could do. But Carlos couldn't have pulled this off on his own, and his co-conspirators have faced severe consequences. Japanese authorities in January of 2020 issued arrest warrants for a former United States Army Special Forces soldier, Michael Taylor, and his son, Peter. Michael had extensive contracts in Lebanon and had completed similar rescue missions during his time with the Special Forces. It was alleged that the men were paid over $1 million, delivered in a combination of bank transfers and Bitcoin. In May of 2020, United States police arrested both Michael and Peter and eventually handed them over to Japanese authorities. The pair pled guilty, and Michael is serving a 2-year prison sentence, while his son was given 20 months. In the years since his arrest and subsequent escape, Carlos has been challenged with legal battles from various nations, but has managed to avoid prison while residing in Lebanon. He has been writing a book and posting on Instagram. He's hired a Hollywood agent and is posting business classes for $20,000 a head. But it has also been reported that he's getting revenge. He spent his time meticulously collecting evidence against Nissan and the Japanese government in what he claims would officially clear his name. To see how this wild twisting story plays out, we'll have to wait and see. The story of Carlos and his charismatic rise to success was gradual and inspiring, but his fall from grace was swift. Carlos maintains his innocence and may never admit his faults, and the truth is yet to be decided. But despite the outcomes of any trials that may eventuate in the future, his legacy may forever be tarnished. And for now, as things stand, it remains a cautionary tale for anyone who believes that they're too big to fail. So what do you guys think? Do you think that Carlos is innocent and it was a plot by the Japanese government and Nissan to take him out? Or do you think he was a megalomaniac CEO who was really trying to extract money from the company? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Though if you do want to discuss in more detail, the best place to do that would be the ColdFusion Discord. So that just about wraps it up. I'd also like to say that the podcast has started up again. So if you want to find the podcast versions of these episodes, you can find it on Spotify and some other platforms. Links will be below. Alright, so that's about it from me. My name is Dagogo and you've been watching ColdFusion. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more. So I'll see you again soon for the next episode. Cheers guys. Have a good one.